Good evening. My name is Tim Andrews, and thank you for joining our live interactive telephone town hall. We are hosting tonight's event to give Congresswoman Spanberger the opportunity to hear directly from you and answer your questions about the issues facing Virginia's families, seniors, and the economy. Now, as I mentioned, this is an interactive forum. Congresswoman Spanberger will be taking as many questions as she possibly can during this event. So if you're joining us on your telephone and you have a question, just press *3 on your telephone keypad at any time, and you'll be placed in line to speak with a member of our staff. They'll take down your name, where you're calling from, and the next time you hear your name, I will be bringing you live on the call, and you'll be able to ask your question directly. Now, if you're joining us online, you can also ask a question by simply submitting one right below the portal on our online streaming player. Just type in your name and your question right below the streaming player at spanberger.house.gov/live. Again, that's spanberger.house.gov/live. And if you're joining us on Facebook Live tonight and you wish to ask the Congresswoman a question, we encourage you to visit that online streaming portal so you can submit your question as well. Additionally, if you would like to receive updates from our office via email, all you have to do is press *6 on your phone at any time. *6 on your telephone keypad, and an operator will collect your email address. Now, we could receive a lot of questions during this event, so if we're not able to address your specific question, please call our district office at 703-987-2180 during normal business hours. But again, if you're joining us live on the phone tonight and you have a question anytime throughout the event, simply press *3 on your telephone keypad or just type them right below the streaming player. Now, please help me welcome Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger. Congresswoman?
Hello, everyone. I'm Abigail Spanberger, and I'm so proud to represent Virginia's 7th District in the U.S. House of Representatives. And I thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. Thank you for sharing your views, asking questions. And as always, I look forward to hearing your thoughts on the issues that are facing you, your family, and our communities. This week has already provided many opportunities for great conversations here in Virginia. And just yesterday, we hosted our 2023 Farm Bill Summit in Caroline County. By the end of the day, we had checked in more than 100 attendees, and they represented a whole host of voices from across Virginia agriculture. During our event, I had the opportunity to hear directly from many Virginia crop and livestock producers, agribusinesses, economists, educators, and community members. As the only Virginian on the House Agriculture Committee, my top priority is listening to the needs of Virginia agriculture as we continue progress on the 2023 Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is a piece of legislation that's negotiated every 5 years, and it is vital across our communities. The Farm Bill impacts how we make sure that kids don't go hungry, how we protect the health of our water and soil, how we connect our neighbors to reliable internet access, and how we expand opportunities for Virginia's producers. Agriculture is the #1 private industry in Virginia, and so being able to support my constituents in agriculture and our larger economy is a fantastic honor. Thank you to everyone who attended, who added to the conversation. I look forward to many, many more. And during conversations here in Virginia, I have continued to hear concerns about fentanyl trafficking, rising overdose rates, and the response to these challenges, the response that families face, the response that first responders face, and what we need to continue doing to combat it. I've also heard on Capitol Hill consistent reports about cartels and transnational criminal organizations using social media platforms to recruit people to participate in their schemes to traffic fentanyl or people. On that front, I wanted to share more about a bipartisan effort that I'm leading in Congress to address this challenge. I recently introduced the Combating Cartels on Social Media Act, which goes after cartels to hold them accountable for preying on vulnerable Americans. Our bipartisan piece of legislation would require DHS to take this threat seriously and ensure that they have the tools to do it. We want to make sure that recruitment trends are able to be reported by social media companies so that these trends can inform our law enforcement officers as they endeavor to crack down on these efforts and keep our fellow Americans safe. And finally, I know that inflation and supply chain issues continue to be a major challenge across Virginia. And that's why I recently introduced my bipartisan bill alongside Congressman Mike Gallagher, a Republican from Wisconsin, to address the workforce shortage in our nation's trucking industry. By helping trucking companies recruit, retain, and reward truck drivers, we can prevent shortages, reduce delays, and lower costs for consumers. I am glad to lead the charge to respond to the needs of Virginia's economy in this way, and this is a piece of legislation I have been focused on in the last Congress and again in this Congress, as it is so vitally important. And finally, I want to make sure that you and your loved ones are aware of the resources available to you through my constituent services team. If you need assistance with the federal agency, Social Security, IRS, the VA, Medicare, please do not hesitate to be in touch with our office at 703-987-2180 or spanberger.house.gov. We will provide assistance and hopefully answer questions you have. And with that, I look forward to taking your questions tonight.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And if you do have a question and you're joining us via telephone, simply press *3 on your telephone keypad, and that'll get you in line to speak with a member of our staff. We'll get your name, area you're calling from, and the nature of your question. And the next time you hear your name, you'll be live on the call and can ask your question directly. And if you're joining us online, simply type your name and question right below the streaming portal. With that, Congresswoman, our first question comes from a Vietnam vet, Terry Hughes from Spotsylvania. Hi, Terry. You're live with the Congresswoman. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for listening to my question. My question is, I'm a 79-year-old Vietnam veteran, and I'm handicapped, and I'm concerned as I grow older. I have no internet access here. I just recently signed up for a hotspot, but it's very limited, and basically I could barely even get onto this call here. I'm wondering if somehow there could be some way. I'm looking actually for home wireless because I know basically putting a cable line is, but a cable line would be great, but home wireless would also be good. And if there's some way that this can be done for seniors and veterans, it would really be great because it's very difficult to be living without the internet these days. In fact, it's very difficult just to get into this call.
Well, Terry, thank you for the question. Certainly, thank you for your service to our country. And you raise a host of important points. First and foremost, across the 7th District, since I was first elected, broadband internet connectivity has been a primary focus of mine, working through USDA programs such as the Reconnect program, passing the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which included tens of billions of dollars for infrastructure, broadband internet infrastructure, to ensure that our communities are connected. It's an economic issue, it's a health issue, and it's just a vital function of our society, how much work continues to be done online, or increasingly is done online. And you mentioned you're a Vietnam veteran. There are great resources that are available, telehealth resources through the VA, and I want to make sure that everyone is eligible and able to access those. So to speak to your particular issue in Spotsylvania County, I want to make sure that we have your contact information because build-outs continue. We are on a strong trajectory in Virginia. Like everyone on the call, I wanted full internet across the 7th District yesterday, and I wanted it done. But we are on a good trajectory. And so I want to make sure we have your specific contact information so that we can connect you potentially with local resources. And there's a pretty good tracking. I recognize the irony in this, but there's pretty good tracking at an online database to demonstrate how the build-outs will continue to occur across Virginia. But as you have access issues at home, we'd be happy to pull up some of that information and make sure that we're guiding you through it and connecting you with any resources. You thinking through veterans, retirees, seniors, and students, I also wanted to highlight a piece of legislation that was signed into law last year. It's a piece of legislation that I led, recognizing that we have a lot of government surplus computers. Depending upon the agency, they need tap speeds, they need high functioning, the newest technology. but those technologies are certainly helpful and good for folks at home accessing the internet, potentially accessing a video call, or doing the day-to-day banking and email and connections with family and friends. And so our legislation changes the law so that government surplus computers no longer needed can be donated to nonprofit refurbishers for onward donations to seniors, veterans, and students. And so I'm proud of that effort. We're moving towards seeing that as a possibility. So, noting that it's one thing to have broadband connectivity, you need that, but you also need the technology in order to be able to connect. And then I wanted to mention with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, while we're working to ensure build out across all of our communities, particularly our rural communities, affordability also continues to be a challenge. And so that legislation provided for a requirement that any internet service provider must have an option that is $30 a month. And those who are eligible, I believe the rate is 200% of the poverty level. And for many who might be living on a fixed income, that is certainly in the realm where they might be living day to day. They're eligible for a rebate that can be used to get that access at home. So we are putting all the pieces in place. Certainly, we're working to make sure that those connections, the broadband connectivity, continues to be made across Virginia and the rest of the country. This has been a focus. And Terry, I'll make sure that we have your contact so that we can maybe answer some questions specific to where you are in Spotsylvania. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you, Terry, for that question. And don't forget, Terry, you can also call the office at 703-987-2180, just if you need to follow up on that. Lori Lee is calling in and joining us on our live interactive telephone town hall. Hi, Lori Lee. You're live with the Congresswoman.
Wonderful. Congressman, I was really glad to hear that you have a bill, because we all know that the shortage of truckers has just made worse the fact that we have a supply problem. Can you give me just a few highlights of what's going to be in that bill?
Absolutely, Lori. Thank you. So the bill gets at the issue that we have an aging workforce. We already have a shortage of truck drivers across the country, and retention is difficult. So this is a tax credit for truck drivers entering the workforce, recognizing that there's some upfront costs, there's training costs, there's some challenges as they enter the workforce. So ensuring that they have a tax credit to attract people to the workforce, to help people get over that initial challenge, potentially of going through the training. And then there is also a retention tax credit for those who are already in the workforce, doing the very necessary work of moving goods across our country, so that we recognize the vital nature of their work with an eligible tax credit for them to be able to claim to keep them in that workforce. It's, I think, an important step forward, and certainly one that I hope recognizes how vital of a workforce. I've had meetings, many meetings. I've tried my hand driving a large truck through a parking lot, and it was very exciting, very interesting, and renewed and affirmed completely and totally my great appreciation for those who do it every single day. And so wanting to make sure that their work is respected, wanting to make sure that their work is acknowledged, and wanting this legislation in place so that we can help attract folks to the workforce and keep them there.
If you're joining us live tonight, you're one of thousands, and we appreciate you joining us for this interactive telephone town hall. And we'd love to get your questions answered through this event. So if you have a question, simply press *3 on your telephone keypad. And if you're joining us online, you can simply type in your name and question right below the streaming player. Don Wood is calling in next. Hi, Don. Thank you for joining us tonight. What's your question?
And thank you for taking my call. Yes, my question for the Congresswoman is the same question I had a month or so ago about the insider trading legislation that Congresswoman Spanberger has introduced. And a month or so ago, when we had the last call. Congresswoman, you were quite optimistic about where that would go. And given what's happening now with Clarence Thomas and the rest, there is kind of an aroma. And I would like to know, in your view, are you still as optimistic that something like that will come to the floor for a vote?
Well, Don, I maintain my optimism, and I'm trying to remember the last time we would have spoken, whether or not we had yet had a committee hearing. So I'll speak to it briefly because I'm trying to remember the time frame of this. But for those who aren't 100% sure what Don is talking about, I have led a piece of legislation that is a passion project for me. I lead it with a Republican colleague from Texas named Chip Roy. And our legislation would ban members of Congress from selling individual stocks. Members of Congress under our legislation, they could invest in mutual funds, save for their retirement, but under no circumstances should a member of Congress be leaving a meeting and calling their broker and buying or selling stocks. They shouldn't be casting a vote and then buying or selling stocks. We have the ability to move markets. We have access to CEOs. We have access to information that, while not crossing the line of insider trading from a legal perspective, absolutely doesn't pass the smell test. And every few months there's a new round of stories talking about behavior on Capitol Hill that just doesn't pass the smell test. There's a new one out now talking about how in the kind of lead up to and days surrounding the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank, that there were very questionable trades, purchases, and sales made by some of my colleagues that were financially beneficial to them and really at least have the perception of being improper. The reason I continue to be optimistic about this legislation moving forward is we continue to get more co-sponsors joining this legislation. Democrats, Republicans, new to Congress, been in Congress for forever, East Coast, West Coast, and everywhere in between. Those who recognize that Congress has a whole host of challenges before it. And one of them continues to be that the American people read story after story that make it look like sometimes members of Congress are paying more attention to their stock portfolio than they are the business of the people. And one way to remove that perception is to prohibit members of Congress from buying or selling stocks. The reasons I continue to be optimistic is sadly because these stories keep happening and the public keeps pushing. I certainly hear about it across our district, but I know my colleagues across the country are hearing about it. Another reason I maintain my optimism is the committee hearing, which I'm not sure if I would have mentioned on the last call. The House Administration Committee had a hearing open to members, and many of us went before the committee and said we want to see this legislation moving forward. My perception of and the comments from the ranking member and the chair, so that would be the top Democrat, the top Republican, were very positive in principle towards our legislation, which is a departure from where we were last year. In the last Congress, the top Democrat and the top Republican, neither of them were particularly aligned with the principle of this legislation. And so Congressman Roy of Texas and I continue to agitate towards movement of this bill in committee. We continue to add co-sponsors, and it continues to grow as a pretty common sense way to address this ongoing issue of, whether there's improper behavior or not, the mere appearance of impropriety needs to be addressed. So I maintain my optimism. We're still relatively early in this Congress, and notably, last year when the former speaker, wasn't necessarily keen on this legislation, the now speaker, McCarthy, expressed, at least in principle, an interest in moving this legislation forward. So my colleague Chip Roy and I will continue to push and joyfully remind people of the positive things they've said about this legislation. And most of all, I just think it's the right thing to do, and we'll get it done. And I'm not giving up on this. So thank you for raising it, Don.
We have a lot of questions coming in this evening, both online and on the telephone. And if you're joining us online and you'd like to ask a question, just type your name and question right below the streaming player, And if you're joining us on the telephone, just hit *3 on your telephone keypad, and that'll get you in line to speak with the Congresswoman. Wade did just that and has a question for you this evening. Good evening, Wade. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, and good evening, Congresswoman. The question I have, I'm a retired police officer. I'm collecting a pension that I earned in Pennsylvania. We relocated to Virginia. The government pension offset in particular, every year the FOP tries to get that legislation passed. What are the odds of the government pension offset being eliminated? And specifically, I'm not as much concerned about me, but my wife, I married her 3 years before I retired. And yet, as a result of that decision to marry me, she now is not going to realize the full benefit of the Social Security that she contributed to. So I would think that a compromise at least would be to stop penalizing spouses. Your thoughts?
I am really happy that you asked this question because, and two things. Let me give a little bit of background for anyone who's listening that doesn't know what the government pension offset or the windfall elimination provision is. These are provisions in our tax code, in the law, that negatively impact retired federal employees and retired public servants, predominantly police, firefighters, and teachers, those who might have a pension related to their public service, but still pay into Social Security. What Wade was talking about relative to his wife means that even though she would have paid into Social Security as an individual, because of the pension that Wade receives and that she will receive as his spouse, that she gets less of her own Social Security, and Wade sees the same. And so, in the event that Wade's wife were to find herself without Wade, her survivor benefits would be lessened because of that, and in fact, her own Social Security is impacted. It's absolutely unfair. This is Social Security that people have paid into, that at one point in time, it was determined that if they had a job in the public sector that had a pension, suddenly it was okay to take dollars out of people's pockets, literally the Social Security that they paid into. So Wade, I am passionate about this issue because I co-lead the effort in the House, and I have since I first got to Congress, to just eliminate this. I appreciate your willingness to find like a middle ground of how we can at least save spouses from this sort of reality. But for me, we need to completely, there's no middle ground. We got to get rid of the WEP. We got to get rid of the GPO. It's absolutely unfair. I recently did about a 30-minute long podcast with the FOP highlighting this issue, because unfortunately some members and some retirees, again, be they retired police officers, firefighters, first responders, teachers, don't know this is an issue until they start, into their retirement. And so we did a long podcast trying to make sure that people are educated on this issue, that people understand. The good news is we've gotten up to 223 co-sponsors as of the time that I checked on it today. Garrett Graves, a Republican from Louisiana, and I are focused on this. He's our co-lead this year. I've been working with Rodney Davis, who retired from Congress. He was a Republican from Illinois. Rodney passed the torch to Garrett, who has long been passionate about this issue, and now we are leading it together again in Rodney's stead. We're focused on it. I will say kind of some of the mechanics. When we get to 290 co-sponsors, we can force a committee movement. We can force a vote on the floor. Last Congress, we actually did surpass 290 co-sponsors, which is really extraordinary because plenty of people will vote for a piece of legislation, but to actually put your name on it as a co-sponsor is an increased mark of someone's commitment to it. Unfortunately, that was a little late in the year. It went to committee and the clock ran out on us. So Garrett and I are committed to making sure that there can be no excuses. We're already at 223, which means if it was brought to the floor, just in co-sponsors alone, it would pass. That number is 218 when every member's present. And so getting us up to the 290 will remove the necessity for House leadership to want to put it on the calendar. We're going to force them to put it on the calendar. And so among the things that we need to be doing right now, and we are doing right now, is making sure that our colleagues on the Senate side know how much we're hustling on this, because we're going to pass it in the House and then we're going to send it to the Senate. And we have to get it through the Senate to get it to the president's desk. And we've got, at this point, we've got the time to do it, and we're going to get it done. And for anybody who wants to learn a little bit more about this, we'll send out information on it in our next newsletter. Please feel free to sign up at spanberger.house.gov. And just as a note, we periodically will send out surveys to constituents about issues that matter. We love it when you answer them. We sent out a survey asking if, who might have comments related to the government pension offset or the windfall elimination provision, and we received more than 5,000 responses. Now, we typically get really positive or really informative quality responses from constituents, but 5,000 about this issue is just an extraordinary response. I just actually did an interview about it this morning on local radio. So depending upon what you tune into, you might be hearing about that. But thank you for raising the issue. So many people across our district and across Virginia are impacted. We're working on it. So thank you, Wade. And for more details, we're happy to send you information directly if we have your contact when you first called in.
And just as a reminder for those of you joining us via telephone, if you'd like to get on that mailing list for that newsletter, simply press *6 right now on your telephone keypad, and we'll collect that email information from you so that you don't miss any of that important information. We have Jamie joining us live from Spotsylvania. Hi, Jamie. Thank you for holding. You're live with the Congresswoman.
Hi, good evening, ma'am. Thank you for taking my question, and first, thanks for all that you're doing. I have a small child.
Ooh. Jamie, are you still there?
We're still showing her as there, but we might have lost her phone call. Hi, Jamie, can you hear us? Well, Congresswoman, her question was regarding gun reform, especially with the current climate in the United States, and what you're doing in that regard.
Well, Jamie, I'm sorry that we lost you. I'm sorry you weren't able to ask your question directly, but I did hear you say with a small child at home, and then hearing the premise of your question, let me go ahead and provide my responses related to gun reforms and gun violence prevention. But I welcome you if you can connect back to our line. If I don't answer your question, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We lost you for a little bit.
They had my question correct.
Perfect. Okay. Perfect. Well, thank you. So I appreciate that question. And I'm a mother of 3 school-age children, and there's not a day that I don't worry about my kids. There's not a day that I don't think about the impact of gun violence on our communities, on our children, what it means that they live in fear so frequently, and what it means that in reality we have lost so many children. Gun deaths is now the #1 cause of deaths for children in the United States, more than car accidents, more than childhood cancer. And that to me is absolutely unthinkable. I believe deeply in our nation, and we are better than that. We are better than letting and accepting that our babies will die to gun violence when we know, because we are alone in that category, we know that it can be prevented. So I support a whole host of reforms, any of which alone would save lives, in combination would save even more. I want to first mention we did pass the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act last year, went to the president's desk. That was a good step in the right direction. It is focused predominantly on mental health supports for those who might be in crisis, assuring domestic abusers can't have access to firearms, but there's still more to be done. Among the things that I support, advocate for, co-sponsor, and in some cases have voted for, safe storage. Certainly, so many children accidentally find a firearm unattended in a home or in a home they're visiting, and do harm intentionally or otherwise to other children. Safe storage laws are incredibly important. Extreme risk protective orders, also known as red flag laws, are vitally important. I just saw an interview with a gentleman who called himself a very conservative sheriff in Florida and said that when they put those red flag laws in place in Florida, they save lives. That shouldn't be a partisan issue. If someone is in danger of doing harm to themselves or others, if they're in a time of crisis, being able to temporarily remove firearms from the circumstance saves lives. I support magazine capacity limits. Under the 1994, as it was called at the time, the assault weapons ban, one of the provisions in that legislation, which expired in 2004, was a limit on magazine capacity. The data are clear that when a shooter has access to larger capacity magazines, death rates are higher. They are able to shoot more, hurt more people, kill more people, and there are fewer options for people to escape that circumstance. As a former law enforcement officer, as someone who carried a firearm every day for a couple of years at the beginning of my career, I had magazines that were marked for law enforcement use only, because it was during that time frame when out in the public view, the purchase of a magazine was limited to 10 rounds, and we had more. I support changing two pieces related to so-called assault rifles or assault style rifles. So frequently we have seen mass murder committed with AR-15 or AR-15 like firearms. One, if they are legal, they absolutely need to have the same age of purchase as a handgun. You have to be 21 to buy a handgun, but you can be 18 to buy an AR-15. That is absolute lunacy. Now, the laws that went in place saying a handgun at 21 and a rifle at 18 were written at a time when a rifle was the hunting rifle that a family member, when they're out, they get a hunting rifle for their 18th birthday, they go deer hunting with their family, they come back home and they put it away. What has changed is the fact that we're no longer talking about a recreational item. We are talking about a tool like the AR-15 that can cause and has caused mass atrocities in our community. So raising that limit is incredible. That age limit is incredibly important. In addition to that, and separate from that, I also support a production stoppage, a ban on these firearms, on assault-style rifles. The legislation, for those who might be curious, clearly defines what is classified as an assault-style rifle, and banning them is something that I support. In the House of Representatives, we have voted on legislation, much of which I have just outlined. Those pieces of legislation did not move within the United States Senate in the last Congress. Now, of course, the folks in the majority have the ability to bring bills to the floor. There's currently a Republican majority, less of a willingness to bring these bills to a vote in the House. And so I am working to use a procedural effort to bring various types of gun reforms, bills that would save lives, to the House floor for a vote. Many of the pieces of legislation that I have mentioned have received some level of bipartisan support. Any of them in isolation would save lives. All of them together would save many. So thank you for bringing up this issue. And I'm going to stop myself there because I could spend the rest of this town hall talking about this incredibly important and tragic issue, and what it is that we can actually do to save our children.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you for the many that are joining us this evening for this interactive telephone town hall. If you'd like to ask a question and you're joining us via telephone, simply press *3 on your telephone keypad. And if you're joining us via the online portal, all you have to do is type your name and question right below the streaming player, and we'll get to your question as quick as we can and try to get to as many as we can this evening. Ralph Johnson is joining us now. Ralph, calling from Spotsylvania. Thank you so much for holding, Ralph.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Congresswoman, for taking my call. My concern is about the infrastructure bill that was passed, and wondering how long is it going to take for the localities to get the money so they can repair the bridges and roads in Spotsylvania County.
Well, Ralph, thank you for this question. And the answer, the answer most directly is it depends. So through the infrastructure law, some of the law funds new programs, and some of the law puts money towards existing funding streams. And so some of the money has already been pushed out to the states to begin being utilized. And some of the dollars are available for application. So it wholly does depend on which funding stream we're discussing. Now, you mentioned roads and bridges. I have been out already in the 7th District to visit with Virginia Department of Transportation bridge engineers, as they have talked about how they are organizing and planning for bridge repair and bridge maintenance based on the funding that has come to Virginia and will continue to come to Virginia through the infrastructure bill. So then it becomes an issue of timing overall about when those different projects are being done. Some of it is the state of disrepair, the requirement and time frame in order to make those repairs. But specific to Spotsylvania County, we worked with the county, and my appreciation to the members of the Board of Supervisors who were really good partners in this, to help ensure that Spotsylvania County could get a $3 million RAISE grant. That's one of the funding streams there for Route 1 congestion improvement programs. And so that funding is there. And at this point in time, Spotsylvania is doing the work to actually, pace that work, make those improvement plans. And that's right there along the Route 1 corridor where the VA facility is going in. And so it's really exciting. Obviously, it's not done yet, but we know, at least in Spotsylvania in particular, that there's going to be substantial financial investments for that corridor project, as well as some of the bridges along the way, up and down Route 1 and 95.
Up next, a caller coming in from Woodbridge. Thank you, Cooper, for joining us this evening. You're live with the Congresswoman.
Yes, hi. My name is Alicia Cooper. Good evening, Congresswoman.
Good evening.
Question is, what are we doing to ensure that Medicare and Social Security won't run out of funding within the next 10 years?
Thank you for this question. So we face funding challenges with Medicare and with Social Security. So frequently we discuss these issues in the terms of running out of funding. While not ideal, I do want to note that the trajectory of the fiscal stability of Social Security is not that it will completely run out of funding and be unavailable. It's that we run the risk if we do not take action, and we have to take action, which I'll speak to in a minute. But we run the risk of risking decreased payments into the future. I fully believe that we have to pay 100% of what was promised to retirees, to people who paid into the system, expecting it to be there when they retired. That's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset and eliminating those. And there have been a variety of efforts within Congress to set up a commission, a committee, a bipartisan group, a select effort to look at all of the possibilities of how we ensure the long-term solvency and and value of these programs that were put in place because we recognized as a society that in retirement, American workers should have a dignified retirement built on what they paid into it, and that their health care should be the same based on their work. They should, and in their retirement, have that support. And so we must, and I will join any effort that exists, and have endeavored to create efforts where we are talking about and understanding the long-term trajectory. One of the important pieces is we need folks in the workforce. We need to ensure that our workforce is expanding as we want to expand our GDP, as we want to strengthen our economy. We must have a strong workforce paying into Social Security. It's frankly one of the reasons why I support immigration reforms. It's one of the reasons why I support ensuring the strength and growth of our economy. But specific to Social Security and Medicare, there are multiple proposals, any of which I think would be an incredibly important step forward that would pull people together, Democrats and Republicans. It has to be a bipartisan solution because we need to get it through the House, the Senate, and to the president's desk, where we can ensure the long-term stability of these vital programs.
Congresswoman, our next question comes from one of our online participants. Greg Lockett writes in, why are weapons identified for delivery to Taiwan being delayed, and what can be done to help fix that problem?
Why are weapons being delivered to Taiwan are being delayed? Is that was the question?
Yes, ma'am. Why are the weapons identified for delivery to Taiwan being delayed, and what can be done to help fix that problem?
So, Greg, I am a member of the Intel Committee. I am focused very much on making sure that our partners and allies have the support that they need to be able to defend themselves proactively. You mentioned Taiwan and you mentioned delivery delays. That is something that I will have to look into and get back to you with on answers. That is not an issue that I have recently had a briefing on or been spun up on. So, Greg, I'm happy to make sure we have your contact information. I'll dig into that a bit more and then look forward to giving you a fulsome answer.
For those of you joining us via the telephone this evening, if you have a question, simply press *3 on your telephone keypad. We're going to try to get to as many as we can before the end of the event. And if you're joining us online, simply type your name and question right below the streaming player. Thomas calling in from Stafford right now. Hi, Thomas. Thank you so much for holding.
Thank you very much. Congresswoman.
Hello, thank you.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions to ask about what is going on in Washington. I mean, I'm from Ghana. I'm a Ghanaian descendant. I came to the United States and I have this opportunities to become a United States citizen. But I've been here 20 years. I've been voting Democrat every time, but it looks like we've been voting Democrat every time, but when they get into office, we don't see nothing. We don't see, like, look at what is going on now. It's like now Congress is for Jim Jordan and Marjorie Taylor Greene. And nobody can say anything. They do whatever they want. They say whatever they want. They cast all this racial stuff to black people. I mean, what is going on is upsetting. It's upsetting, and something needs to be done. Because when we feel like we vote Democrat and Democrats gonna do something, and these Republicans continue doing stuff, and you guys cannot say anything, it will come to a time when it's voting time. I'm not even gonna waste my time and go there on my family because all my family, we all Democrats. We're not going to even going to waste our time going there to vote. Because what is going on?
Ooh. Are you there?
You don't belong here.
Sir, you
When you
broke
look
up. You broke up for a moment on the line. I'm listening.
Yeah. When you look at what is going on now, we want to take our country back. We want to do this. This country doesn't belong to nobody, man.
Sir, if I can say, and I want to thank you for bringing your passion to this conversation. I want to thank you for expressing your feelings. And I will agree with you. This country belongs to no one. This country was built on an idea that people could come from anywhere in the world and become whatever they wanted. And we have been a place of beauty and hope and inspiration and opportunity for the people worldwide. And I am grateful that you and your family chose to come to the United States. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to represent so many people who choose to be Americans, who choose to come here with the dream of being Americans, who choose to come here with the dream of contributing to our society, our community, the richness of all that we are. And I am sorry that folks on Twitter or on the news who rage and rage and rage and say terrible things are what continue to break through. But, sir, I will tell you that I am grateful for you and for every person who chooses to bring their gifts, their work ethic, their focus, and their dreams to this country. At one point in time, my forefathers did the same thing. And I, as a representative, do not scream on Twitter and do not scream on TV. It is not my personality, and it is not the professional job that anyone who voted for me elected me to do. And it is not the professional job that anyone who didn't vote for me wants to see their representative bring to Congress. I endeavor to do my job with honor and with dignity and with deep respect for every person. And I want to apologize to you and to anyone who feels at all disrespected by what comes out of the halls of Congress. This is why I continue to work to try and change the function of Congress, to try to function and focus on ethics reforms, because the American people deserve more than a bunch of people screaming at each other on Twitter, than a bunch of people who want to divide and anger and harm communities. And I hope that if there are particular issues of legislation that are important to you, sir, that we can follow up and I can tell you how I stand on those issues. But as an issue of principle, I want you to know that for all of the division that some people try to sow, there are many people who are hard at work trying to make sure that we are bringing civility and kindness and purpose and ferocity of principle back to the halls of Congress. And so thank you for earnestly sharing your feelings. Thank you for being critical with your comments. And I will reflect on them for quite some time. And I thank you for bringing that conversation forward. And if I look forward to continuing the conversation with you into the future, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Janine from Stafford has been holding pretty much the entire time. Janine, thank you so much for your patience. You're live with the Congresswoman. Please go right ahead.
Hi, Congresswoman Spanberger. Excuse me.
Hello.
Thank you for your time and for all of your past support for Alzheimer's issues. My question basically, I have a little info first, but last year, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services made an unprecedented decision that denied Medicare coverage of current and future treatments for Alzheimer's, making these the only FDA-approved drugs that are not covered under Medicare. This decision must be reversed. for CMS to treat these people with Alzheimer's and their families differently than they do other diseases is very unacceptable. So just ask if you could please show CMS your support for full access to FDA-approved Alzheimer's treatments.
Janine, thank you for raising this issue. Certainly, I have heard from and spoken to families who are impacted. There are approved medications, as you note, that have not been approved for payment, in part because of price. And I will continue to make clear, and will do so again, the fact that these medications that have been approved that show vital impacts for Alzheimer's patients need to be available to those whose doctors want to prescribe them as a course of treatment. So thank you for raising this issue, and I will follow up on it.
Up next, another caller from Spotsylvania this evening. Floyd Kramer is joining us on the line. And Floyd has a question for you, Congresswoman. And for those of you who are still hoping to get a question in, if you press *3 on your telephone keypad, we'll do our best to get to yours as quickly as possible. Hi, Floyd, are you with us? And I'm sorry, Floyd, can you hear us this evening? It looks like we may have lost Floyd, Congresswoman. So let's go to Sarah, see if we can get Floyd back on the line. Sarah's on the line right now from Orange County. Hi, Sarah. Thank you for holding.
Thank you. Hello, Congresswoman. Thank you for representing us.
Hello.
I have a concern related to the farm bill that you mentioned. I live on a cattle farm, and several years ago, a water-intensive agricultural concern purchased property and began business in the neighboring property. And as a result, the beautiful creek that runs through our property and to a recreational area became overgrown with algae as it had never been, with an oily slick on it. And I wondered, what agency should I work through, or how does the farm bill affect these types of things?
So that might not be, Sarah, that might not be, it likely isn't a farm bill related issue. What could be a farm bill related issue would be the practices that you might employ on your cattle farm if you choose to employ rotational grazing, some natural grasslands, if you have any row crops, no-till, cover crops. Those are all within the Farm Bill in terms of federal support to those programs for producers who want to employ those voluntary programs. And certainly, rotational grazing or putting up riparian barriers that can have positive benefits for streams and waterways just from keeping the cattle out of the creeks. But what you're speaking to would be a different issue. And I presume from your question that the change in the water quality and the water appearance might be because of runoff from the operation upstream. So we'll want to get some specific details from you, and I'm going to ask you to maybe stay on the line, and somebody from my team will get specific details from you, because we'll want to connect you with the right folks, but we're going to probably want to ask you for questions, a few questions that you don't want to answer live on the line about where you live exactly, and further details. But we can connect you with some agencies if you've got concerns about what might be occurring with your water quality.
Wonderful. Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you so much. All right. Do we have the next question?
Yes, and we were trying to get, looks like we had Keenan coming back on. We're trying to get Keenan reconnected. Let's see if we can get to Joseph right now. Joseph for Prince William. Hi, Joseph. Thank you for holding this evening.
You're welcome. Thanks for taking my question. Congresswoman?
Yes.
Hello? I have a question regarding, thanks for taking my question. I have a question regarding water quality. There was some media reports this week about the Occoquan Reservoir, which services eastern Prince William as well as Fairfax County, and a environmental group, I think it's a nonprofit, did a study nationwide. They took samples in 31 states. And in all cases, including at Occoquan, there was a water quality issue relating to a chemical called Forever
PFAS?
Chemicals.
Yeah.
PFAS, yeah.
Yeah.
And from what I've read and heard about it, EPA has published some standards, but they're preliminary. And so there's some questions on what the right standards might be. And there are also issues with regard to, once everybody agrees on standards, how to filter. So there's some technological issues. And of course, when you're talking about chemicals like this that really are a product or a byproduct of development, food packaging, clothing, manufacturing, and things like that, any level is probably not acceptable, but it would be a good start if everybody could agree on what the guidelines should be, because they're associated with risk of cancer, developmental issues, thyroid problems, and vaccine resistance and things like that. So I was wondering, A, what more light you could shed on that, and B, what's EPA doing to set the national standards and not just let it up to local jurisdictions?
Absolutely. So it's exciting that you asked this question today, because I was just out at George Mason's location right there on the river, and meeting with researchers, PhD researchers, and graduate students who are conducting studies on a whole host of things, but among them talking about organisms in the water, talking about contaminants in the water. A 42-year study, in fact, that they've conducted in parts of Northern Virginia on water quality, sort of a longitudinal study. So this is actually very top of mind. The particular article that you're referencing, I haven't read, but certainly I have focused on issues related to PFAS. Commonly called forever chemicals, have a demonstrated link to various types of illnesses, including and particularly cancer. And so in the last Congress, we've moved forward with various pieces of legislation focused on making funding available and resources available for cleanup efforts or mitigation efforts in areas where there is identifiable PFAS, and ensuring that we can improve the circumstances, particularly of waterways, as you mentioned. But in terms of where EPA is with setting particular standards for updated levels or mitigation or toxicity plans specific to what they have done recently, I'd be happy to follow up on that and send it out to you. Maybe we'll include it in our next newsletter for anyone who might be interested as well.
Congresswoman, we have come to the end of our event this evening, and for those of you that were not able to ask a question, we're going to follow up and give you some information so that you can get your questions answered. But Congresswoman, I want to send it back to you for any closing remarks you might have this evening.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you to everyone who's joined. Thanks for staying on the line. Thanks for asking questions. Just a reminder, if you have questions about a federal agency or challenges Medicare, Social Security, the VA, please be in touch with our office. We can help on the constituent service side. If you have any additional questions now or into the future, please reach out to our office. You can call with a question. You can submit it online. We'll get back to you. I certainly want to make sure that everyone who has an interest in a particular area knows the work that I'm doing related to that area, or knows where I stand on legislation. I just want to thank our different callers. We had a host of different issues come through tonight in the calls. And so I was so pleased to be able to answer a variety of questions. Thank you for the commitment and focus on issues, everything from water quality and risk prevention as it relates to contamination of water, be it on a farm or in our communities. Thank you for raising the issue of gun violence in our communities and the need for reforms. My answer to your question ascribes a need for reforms. Thank you for asking about my stance on a whole host of issues related to the economy, related to our trucking bill. And I'm just pleased to have the chance to speak with you all, answer questions, and give you an update on what we're doing across the district. So thank you so much. I am grateful for your time. I wish you a very, very good evening, and thank you for spending an hour with us.
Good night, Congresswoman, and thank you to all of you who joined us and took the time out to join us for this important Virginia-focused telephone town hall. We appreciate the opportunity to answer your questions, but if we were not able to get to your specific question this evening, please call our district office at 703-987-2180 during normal business hours, or you can also go to spanberger.house.gov. Thank you again. Stay safe and have a wonderful rest of your week. Good night.